wives and children, to tell them what our people are fighting for, what kind of enemy we are up against, and who is pushing the world into new wars and crises and deriving blood-stained benefits from this tragedy, who are part of our united people, have seen with their own eyes what the ruling class of the so-called West have prepared for humanity as a whole. They have dropped their masks and shown what they are really made of. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the West decided that the world and all of us would permanently accede to its dictates. In 1991, the West thought that Russia would never rise after such shocks and would fall to pieces on its own. This almost happened. We remember the horrible 1990s, hungry, cold, and hopeless. But Russia remained standing, came alive, grew stronger, and occupied its rightful place in the world. Meanwhile, the West continued and continues looking for another chance to strike a blow at us, to weaken and break up Russia, which they have always dreamed about, to divide our state and set our peoples against each other, and condemn them to poverty and extinction. They cannot rest easy knowing that there is such a great country with this huge territory in the world, with its natural wealth, resources, and people who cannot and will not do someone else's bidding. The West is ready to cross every line to preserve the neo-colonial system which allows it to live off the world, to plunder it, thanks to the domination of the dollar and technology, to collect an actual tribute from humanity, to extract its primary source of unearned prosperity, the rent paid to the hegemon. The preservation of this annuity is their main, real, and absolutely self-serving motivation. This is why total desovereignization is in their interest. This explains their aggression towards independent states, traditional values, and authentic cultures. Their attempts to undermine international and integration processes, new global currencies, and technological development centers they cannot control. It is critically important for them to force all countries to surrender their sovereignty to the United States. In certain countries, the ruling elites voluntarily agree to do this, voluntarily agree to become vassals. Others are bribed or intimidated. And if this does not work, they destroy entire states, leaving behind humanitarian disasters, devastation, ruins, millions of wrecked and mangled human lives, terrorist enclaves, social disaster zones, protectorates, colonies, and semi-colonies. They don't care. All they care about is their own benefit. I want to underscore again that their insatiability and determination to preserve their unfettered dominance are the real causes of the hybrid war that the collective West is waging against Russia. They do not want us to be free. They want us to be a colony. They do not want equal cooperation. They want to loot. They do not want to see us a free society, but a mass of soulless slaves. They see our thought and our philosophy as a direct threat. This is why they target our philosophers for assassination. Our culture and art present a danger to them, so they are trying to ban them. Our development and prosperity are also a threat to them because competition is growing. They do not want or need Russia, but we do. Have repeatedly shattered against the courage and resilience of our people. Russia will always be Russia. We will continue to defend our values and our motherland. The West is counting on impunity, on being able to get away with anything. As a matter of fact, this was actually the case until recently. Strategic security agreements have been trashed. Agreements reached at the highest political level have also been declared tall tales. Firm promises not to expand NATO to the east gave way to dirty deception as soon as our former leaders bought into them. Missile defense, intermediate range and shorter range missile treaties have been unilaterally dismantled under far-fetched pretexts. And all we hear is the West is insisting on a rules-based order. Where did that come from anyway? Who has ever seen these rules? Who agreed or approved them? Listen, this is just a lot of nonsense, utter deceit, double standards, or even triple standards. They must think we're stupid. Western elites not only deny national sovereignty and international law, their hegemony has pronounced features of totalitarianism, despotism, and apartheid. They brazenly divide the world into their vassals, the so-called civilized countries, and all the rest, who according to designs of today's Western racists, should be added to the list of barbarians and savages. False labels like rogue country or authoritarian regime are already available and are used to stigmatize entire nations and states, which is nothing new. There is nothing new in this. Deep down, the Western elites have remained the same colonizers. They discriminate and divide peoples into the top tier and the rest. We have never agreed to and will never agree to such political nationalism and racism. What else, if not racism, is the Russophobia that is being spread around the world? What, if not racism, is the West's dogmatic conviction that its civilization and neoliberal culture is an indisputable model for the entire world to follow? You're either with us or against us. It even sounds strange. Western elites are even shifting repentance for their own historical crimes on everyone else, demanding that the citizens of their countries and other peoples confess to things they have nothing to do with at all. For example, the period of colonial conquests. It is worth reminding the West that it began its colonial policy back in the Middle Ages, followed by the worldwide slave trade, the genocide of Indian tribes in America, the plunder of India and Africa, the wars of England and France against China, as a result of which it was forced to open its ports to the opium trade. What they did was get entire nations hooked on drugs and purposefully exterminated entire ethnic groups for the sake of grabbing land and resources, hunting people like animals. This is contrary to human nature, truth, freedom, and justice. While we are proud that in the 20th century, our country led the anti-colonial movement, which opened up opportunities for many people around the world to make progress, reduce poverty and inequality, and defeat hunger and disease. To emphasize one of the reasons for the centuries-old Russophobia, the Western elite's unconcealed animosity towards Russia, is precisely the fact that we did not allow them to rob us during the period of colonial conquests and force the Europeans to trade with us on mutually beneficial terms. Western countries have been saying for centuries that they bring freedom and democracy to other nations. Nothing could be further from the truth. Instead of bringing democracy, they suppressed and exploited, and instead of giving freedom, they enslaved and oppressed. The unipolar world is inherently anti-democratic and unfree. It is false and hypocritical through and through. The United States is the only country in the world that has used nuclear weapons twice, destroying the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, and they created a precedent. Recall that during World War II, the United States and Britain reduced Dresden, Hamburg, Cologne, and many other German cities to rubble, without the least military necessity. It was done ostentatiously, and to repeat, without any military necessity. They had only one goal, as with the nuclear bombing of Japanese cities, to intimidate our country and the rest of the world. The United States left a deep scar in the memory of the people of Korea and Vietnam with their carpet bombings and use of napalm and chemical weapons. It actually continues to occupy Germany, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and other countries, which they cynically refer to as equals and allies. Look now, what kind of alliance is that? The whole world knows that the top officials in these countries are being spied on and their offices and homes are bugged. It's a disgrace for those who do this and for those who, like slaves, silently and meekly swallow this arrogant behavior. Washington demands more and more sanctions against Russia, and the majority of European politicians obediently go along with it. They clearly understand that by pressuring the EU to completely give up Russian energy and other resources, the United States is practically pushing Europe towards deindustrialization in a bid to get its hands on the entire European market. These European elites understand everything, they do, but they prefer to serve the interests of others. This is no longer servility, but direct betrayal of their own peoples. God bless, it is up to them. But the Anglo-Saxons believe sanctions are no longer enough, and now they have turned to subversion. It seems incredible, but it is a fact. By causing explosions on Nord Stream's international gas pipelines passing along the bottom of the Baltic Sea, they have actually embarked on the destruction of Europe's entire energy infrastructure. It is clear to everyone who stands to gain. Those who benefit are responsible, of course. At the same time, the West has clearly been engaged in wishful thinking for a long time. In launching the sanctions blitzkrieg against Russia, for example, they thought that they could once again line up the whole world at their command. As it turns out, however, such a bright prospect does not excite anyone, other than complete political masochists and admirers of other unconventional forms of international relations. Most states refuse to snap a salute and instead choose the sensible path of cooperation with Russia. The West clearly did not expect such insubordination. They simply got used to acting according to a template, to grab whatever they please by blackmail, bribery, intimidation, and convince themselves that these methods would work forever, as if they had fossilized in the past. Such self-confidence is a direct product not only of the notorious concept of exceptionalism, although it never ceases to amaze, but also the real information hunger in the West. The truth has been drowned in an ocean of myths, illusions, and fakes, using extremely aggressive propaganda, lying like gobbles. The more unbelievable the lie, the quicker people will believe it. That is how they operate, according to this principle. I want to make special note of the fact that there is every reason to believe that the Western elites are not going to look for constructive ways out of the global food and energy crisis that they and they alone are to blame for, as a result of their long-term policy dating back long before our special military operation in Ukraine, in Donbass. They have no intention of solving the problems of injustice and inequality. I am afraid they would rather use other formulas they are more comfortable with. And here it is important to recall that the West bailed itself out of its early 20th century challenges with World War I. Profits from World War II helped the United States finally overcome the Great Depression and become the largest economy in the world, and to impose on the planet the power of the dollar as a global reserve currency. In the 1980s crisis, things came to a head in the 1980s again. The West emerged from it largely unscathed by appropriating the inheritance and resources of the collapsed and defunct Soviet Union. That's a fact. Now, in order to free itself from the latest web of challenges, they need to dismantle Russia as well as other states that choose a sovereign path of development at all costs, to be able to further plunder other nations' wealth and use it to patch their own holes. If this does not happen, I cannot rule out that they will try to trigger a collapse of the entire system and blame everything on that, or God forbid, decide to use the old formula of economic growth through war. Russia is aware of its responsibility to the international community and will make every effort to ensure that cooler heads prevail. The current neo-colonial model is ultimately doomed. This much is obvious. But I repeat that its real masters will cling to it to the end. They simply have nothing to offer the world except to maintain the same system of plundering and racketeering. They do not give a damn about the natural right of billions of people, the majority of humanity, to freedom and justice, and the right to determine their own future. They have already moved on to the radical denial of moral, religious, and family values. Let's answer some very simple questions for ourselves. Now I would like to return to what I said and want to address all citizens of the country, not just the colleagues that are here in the hall, but all citizens of Russia. Do we want to have here in our country, in Russia, parent number 1, parent number 2, and parent number 3? They have completely lost it. Instead of mother and father, do we want our schools to impose on our children, from their earliest days in school, perversions that lead to degradation and extinction? Do we want to drum in their heads that certain other genders exist along with women and men, and to offer them gender reassignment surgery? Is that what we want for our country and our children? This is unacceptable to us. We have a different future of our own. The world has entered a period of fundamental revolutionary transformation. New centers of power are emerging. They represent the majority of the international community. They are ready not only to declare their interests, but also to protect them. They see in multipolarity an opportunity to strengthen their sovereignty, which means gaining genuine freedom, historical prospects, and the right to their own independent, creative, and distinctive forms of development in a harmonious process. As I've already said, we have many like-minded people in Europe and the United States, and we feel and see their support. An essentially emancipatory, anti-colonial movement against unipolar hegemony is taking shape in the most diverse countries and societies. Its power will only grow with time. It is this force that will determine our future geopolitical reality.